Welcome to 24 of you plus the two of us. This is Catherine Paix that's going to be talking to you today on creating meaningful music and movement lessons for students on the autism spectrum, which I don't have any of my own children, but I teach some who are, and I'm really curious to see. So Catherine's been teaching at Aspect Southeast Sydney School for Children with Autism since 1996. Since then, she has been developing programs and strategies that aim to maximise engagement and skill development in students on the autism spectrum and help equip her colleagues to more confidently teach music and movement in the classroom. But rather than listen to me, I'm going to hand over to Catherine and she can share her experience, her knowledge and anything else. Go for it, Catherine.
Thank you. And this is my first time presenting at a conference. I've been to 2 ASME conferences in the past, and always thought there's a bit of a gap there for special needs workshops and studies, and so I really wanted to do this today. And before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands that we're living, learning and working from today, and recognise their continuing connection to the land, sea, waterways and community. As we share our knowledge of teaching and learning, may we also pay respect to elders, both past and present, as it is their knowledge and experience that holds the key to the success of future generations. And today's presentation is coming to you from my part on Darug land. So I'm based in Sydney, lockdown Sydney. Also, Aspect, the organisation that I work for, has also recently come up with this statement of inclusion, probably more applicable for in-person meetings, but I'll read it anyway. So everyone is welcome in this meeting. I want you to feel it is okay to be authentically yourself. Please let me know in the chat if there's anything I can do to help include you in the meeting. Everyone is welcome to use their own strategies to help them engage and effectively participate. So particularly if there's anybody who has any hearing issues, if you want to tell me now so I can make sure that I'm closer to the camera, or making sure that I'm always, really looking at the camera, please let me know all of those things. I don't expect people's cameras to be on either. So although it is nice to have some friendly faces. So thank you. So just, why does it always do that? A little bit more about me. So yeah, my name's Catherine Paix. So it's a French pronunciation of that word, which means peace in French. So as I said, I'm located in Sydney in the inner west here. So I've got a teaching degree, and then I did my graduate diploma in special education back in 1995. And then since then, I've gone on and got myself a Bachelor of Music, which I completed 10 years ago now. I've been working in the disability sector since 1993. So once I finished my teaching degree, there wasn't a job for me that was easy to get. So I went actually into residential care for 3 years. And I think that was a really, really solid grounding in working in the disability sector, in understanding the dynamics of families and the context that students with special needs live in. And so after that, or while I was working in residential care, I did my special education degree and then got the job that I'm still working in. So 25 years later, I'm still with Aspect, gone through a few name changes in the time that I've been there, and working now as the specialist music teacher in our school. So I've been doing that role just coming up to 6 years now. And I guess that my other musical activity is that I'm a volunteer choir master for a choir that's run by our church, Summerhill Community Choir. We've had, when we were able to meet in person, which we tried a little bit this year, we had to scrap that though. We have up to about 70 people coming, and it's been just a fantastic community thing, all ages. So it's something I'm really, really passionate about as well. I also do some private music tuition in a regular school, which I find really helpful to just keep me in touch with neurotypical children, because when you're teaching in special needs, you can get yourself into a bit of a bubble. So that's a little bit about me. And I'll just share with you a little bit about our school. So Aspect is Autism Spectrum Australia, previously known as Autism Association of New South Wales, Autistic Association of New South Wales when I started. And it's the largest autism specific service provider in Australia. And we have quite a massive schools program. So, and all our schools offer an individualised setting for students on the autism spectrum. Now, our school, South East Sydney, is the biggest of all of the schools. So we've got, most of them are in New South Wales, but we've also got one in South Australia and in Adelaide. And our school operates from kindergarten now through to year 12. And we've got around 170 students. And we operate remotely, so we don't have one premise that all those students are on. We actually operate over 13 sites for our school, and most of our schools operate over a whole bunch of sites. We've got the most out of all of the schools, and there's just a little bit of a map there that shows it's basically south of the harbour, you know, for people who are in Sydney and care, and sort of east of the Hume Highway, sort of roughly-ish, and all the way down to Sutherland, and then some of the underneath that places that are below that are kind of taken in by our South Coast school. At this point, I'm just also going to flag that I'm going to be using people with autism and the autism spectrum, but there is quite a move in the autism community to change that language to autistic people. So I'm just flagging that in case there's anybody who's, you know, really up with that. So because our organisation hasn't made that shift over, and I think it will probably come, you know, I'm going to be using the current language that most people understand and use. Okay, so now it'll help me if I can find out a little bit about you. So if you're able to, if you're happy to, I'd love you to just say hi in the chat, so your name will come up. If you can do this to everyone, your name will come up, where you're tuning in from, and what your roles are, perhaps you know, what your experience with autism is. We'll just take a couple of minutes for this. Because, you know, just try to replicate the in-person vibe. I'll even just pop this off screen share in a moment, because the other thing I'd like you to do is encourage you to jot down something that you might like to take away from this session. And again, if you wanted to put that in the chat, go right ahead. Otherwise, no, I just encourage you to jot it down. So when we get to the end, if you feel like there's bits missing or there's some questions that you have, it'll just give you somewhere to focus your questions. So just with questions, just again, either address them to the chair for later. And I've got 2 allocated question times during the session. Or please, if you want to, if you know something's really pressing, or you know it's very pertinent, or you've not even if it's a question, if you've got a comment, because I think in our collective experience, we've all got things to contribute to this. I certainly don't want to be seen as the person who knows everything, because I don't. And I know that people here come from a bunch of places. So I'll just pop the share off and, oh, hello. Okay, all righty. Yeah, great. So we've got, it gives me a really good idea of who we've got here and what where people are coming from. And you as well. I think that's the one thing I'm so sad about not being in person, is that just, you know, networking and the collegial experience. Great. So we've got individual teachers, Canberra. Yeah, great. Fantastic. It's organisation. I'll have to try and actually copy these because I can't read them all.
Catherine, the chat text should be saved at the end of this meeting. So let me know and I can provide you with that for later on if there's follow-up needed.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, no, yeah, no, so it's good for me to have a bit of an idea of who I'm speaking to. That's great. And I've included my email address there, and I'll pop it up again at the end, so that feel free to get in touch with me. this is great. I hope you're having a great time reading all of these things. It's definitely worth the time to take time and do this. Okay, good. Yep. So someone who teaches in high school. So I do teach up to stage 4 in our classes, so up to year 8 in our school. Yeah. It's good, good. So we've got people from around the country. I'm going to make that bigger. That's a bit easier for me to see now. Welcome, welcome, welcome to everybody. It's great. Great to have such a variety of places represented and people. Wow. All right, that's good. And it's lovely to see people in tertiary teacher education represented here too, because I think that's actually been a theme for the things that I've been listening to today, that there's quite a big gap in what is happening in teacher education. And I certainly think that, yeah, if we can make a difference there, that's fantastic. All right, I'll go back to sharing my screen. So fabulous. Thank you so much. Okay, so for this session, I'm hoping that by the end of it, that you'll have a greater understanding of the autism spectrum and a greater understanding of how some of the characteristics of autism have an impact on student learning, and identify some principles that will help you with lesson planning and lesson delivery. Now, it's always been my belief that every teacher should be special education trained. And so I think that I really hope that even the elements that I share here, and these are from my experience and from my years in the game, are actually applicable to other curriculum areas, but also very applicable in a multitude of situations. So just to be clear on my particular teaching situation, we do have sort of 6 to 8 students in our class with a teacher aide. So we are working with small groups, sometimes even less than 6 children. Our biggest classes are in our high school, where we might have 9 or 10 students. So I do understand that there's a different level of complexity when you're in a mainstream setting with a lot more students than that. Okay. I'll read some more of those later on. It's tough being a presenter. You have to keep it all moving. So we've done the introductions and the sharing. And so this is just what we'll cover in this session. So I've just put it into 2 parts, where we'll start to look at the opportunities and challenges about teaching students with autism. And then we'll move on to some of my practical tips, some of the things that I use, my go-tos, whenever I'm actually preparing lessons. And I've come from a place where I've kind of been preparing my lessons from scratch. And so I know that not everybody also has that privilege. So I do hope that you can really still have some things that you can take away from this. So we'll move on to part 1. And so as an organisation, and this is all what I'm sharing with you over the next couple of slides, is coming from an aspect perspective. And I think there's the other thing that that there has been lately in autism is a bit of a move away from a real medical model and a deficit model, I guess. And so what aspect comes from it with this concept of a different brilliant. And so what I'll start off with is just we'll have a look at what is autism. I'm assuming a lot of you know, but let's just have a somewhat thing where we're all kind of on the same page about it. And so it's a condition that affects how a person thinks, feels, interacts with others, and experiences their environment. The disability is lifelong, and every autistic person is different to the next. And so we describe autism as a spectrum. That's how it's traditionally been described. It's estimated that 1 in 70 people are somewhere on the autism spectrum. And so the terminology that we use, the sort of tagline, is a different brilliant. So I'd like to just show this video. So it goes for a couple of minutes. It's pretty cute.
There are 4 babies born every second all around the world, each unique. A creation of brilliance. Some of us are a different brilliant. We see things differently. Or hear things differently. Some of us only see solutions. Or are just everyday heroes. Sometimes we struggle in social situations, and we really appreciate when you give us a hand. And you may not know by looking at us, but we can be anyone. And this is how we came into the world, as a different brilliant, because we are on the spectrum.
I do apologise for my mouse moving around a bit. It seems to be playing up somewhat. Okay. So, all right. So the other thing that Aspect has done is developed this kind of, instead of, as a way of representing the spectrum, is putting it as a bit of a constellation. So it's not linear, I think, is the main thing that we need to understand. So we've got all these different domains, and people on the autism spectrum can appear in different spots in each of those domains. And I know, you know, I'm sorry if there's a lot of people who know all this. I'm just going to be, yeah, like I said, we're just so that we're all in the same space. So, and again, if you've got something you want to contribute to this, please unmute yourself and say, you know, what you find that goes on in that area, because, you know, I really do want this to be a collaborative meeting. So some of the areas of strengths that we might find in people on the autism spectrum are in logical and visual thinking. They might have a persistence or perseveration on a whole bunch of or on a particular topic. They might have a real eye for detail and some good skills with technology. They might have excellent skills with memory or facts and figures. They might have really, really specific interest areas that could be typical, you know, such as trains or sport or Disney, or really, really unusual deep interest areas such as rubbish trucks or bridges or air conditioners, you know. So these are some of the things, and I know it can see people nodding their heads and thinking of somebody in their mind. And now up to 20% of autistic people have an exceptional or above average skill in one or more areas like reading or maths or art, music, memory, all of those sorts of things. And all of this information actually just comes straight from the Aspect website. So if you're able to, you can find that there. So our next domain would be in communication. So you'll find that there are some people with autism who are unable to actually communicate verbally. So they have other means of communicating through gestures or through symbols, through technology, pictures. Some who do have verbal language might have a tendency to communicate very directly and honestly and not understand necessarily the social mores around talking and communicating. They might have difficulty with small talk because they don't quite understand you know, jargon. They might not understand sarcasm and jokes, things like that. And they might also repeat words or lines that they've heard in a completely different context. Sometimes it might even be relevant. You sometimes hear kids, you know, repeat some line from a TV show that has swearing in it, and it's a quite an appropriate setting, but, you know, not appropriate to use that language. Again, I see people laughing and thinking of somebody that they know. And also there can be difficulties with understanding oral information, and so often we'll find that oral information needs to be given quite a structured way, and we need to often leave a little bit of processing time for students to be able to understand what's being said, or use other ways of communicating. So in terms of social interactions domain, there's people with autism can display discomfort in some settings where it's very busy, or where it's complex, where there's lots of demands placed on them. They might prefer to play alone. I guess there's a lot of non-autistic people who probably fall into that category as well. But there are that, you know, they sometimes prefer to do things their own way and on their own. Now, this is one thing that I find a lot too. You know, they have an ability to be paying attention without giving you eye contact. And it can be quite tricky because we often associate that with attention. But, you know, the number of times I think, oh, you know, the student isn't paying attention, and then weeks later they'll come up with something that shows that they have been paying attention. They might use and respond to body language in a different way than what we're accustomed to some of our other students. And we can misunderstand often their social interactions. And so in the leisure and play domain, we'll see that often people on the autism spectrum will choose to only engage in leisure activities that are really of high interest to them. They're just things that they're passionate about, and nothing else really matters. They might have non-traditional play characteristics, like repetitively lining up toys, or sifting things through their hands, or spinning things around, or just looking at one particular thing, or looking at things from different angles, smelling them. These are all things that I've seen. And they often prefer to do things their way. This is the right way to do it, and I'm not going to be told any other way. So there is a little bit of rigidity in that. Sometimes they're more comfortable socializing through technology. And excuse me, I'm just going to take a glass of water. It's interesting, not just in socializing, but in also their learning, because in New South Wales, we've had a term of doing online learning. I've had a term of doing Zoom music lessons. I've found it quite interesting that some of the students are much more ready to participate, much more willing to participate and do try actions and try singing and all those sorts of things online than they are actually in the classroom setting. So our next domain is the sensory domain. And so you'll find that sometimes people on the autism spectrum have a hyper awareness in some of their senses. They may be sound sensitive. They may be sensitive to smells. I've gone into classrooms. I might have my little, you know, cup of chai tea, my safe cup, and I've been having some of that, and then I go and teach, and I know there's one of the boys who's really smell sensitive. He's like, oh, yuck, what have you been drinking? You know, I can't come near you, because he can just smell those spices on my breath. Sound sensitivity, I think this is a really, really big one when we're teaching music, and something that really comes, you know, is quite evident to me a lot is in many ways, we put on the music and we think the kids are listening to the music, but they actually might be listening to the mower that's going on in the lawn next door. And so we're not always 100% sure that students are actually tuning into the sensory stimuli, the teaching stimuli that we are actually, you know, giving them, that we would find that the neurotypical peers might be more able to concentrate on. So often they will feel distressed when their sensory issues are, you know, being overloaded, or when their sensory needs are not being met, and you'll get, you know, covering of ears. You might get distressed crying. You might get, you know, trying to leave the situation. And I was just in the early childhood talk, and I noticed that where they were giving the students with autism the option to actually leave the lesson and have a quieter space to go to. You know, so it's great, you know, that in education we're coming to ways of modifying our environment to assist students with autism to actually better access what we're giving them. So, and you might get some students who have sensitivity to touch. So, you know, sometimes, you know, if I haven't got my hair tied back and I'm leaning in close with a student, they might feel that my hair tickling them, and that's really sensitive to them. So there's a lot of kinds of things like that going on. So the next domain is in their thinking. So you'll find that there's really uneven thinking abilities within one person often. They might have this idea of focusing on something and have this perseveration of keeping on a topic or an interest for a really long time and being really reluctant to move away from that. Difficulty switching from one thing to another. And sometimes, you know, you'll notice that they really tune into specific detail that is irrelevant, or, you know, something that not anyone else has noticed. All right, and our last domain we'll think about, or that's on this autism constellation here, is in terms of experiencing and displaying emotions. And you'll find that sometimes there's really strong emotional responses to things that are out of proportion with, you know, what's going on. Or you might find also that there's different difficulties with actually owning their own emotions or other people's emotions, identifying them. You know, I think a lot of our students, I find, you know, they place a premium on being happy. Everything is about being happy. They don't, you know, understand that it's okay to have all these different human emotions, and, you know, it's express them in ways that are appropriate. And so you'll find that there might be, again, things that they'll do that, you know, and we don't see in our neurotypical children, like flapping hands when they're anxious, or pacing and things like that to show their excitement. And so we do often find that there's a bit of a delay in learning to regulate emotions. I'll just pop up my chat in case there's anything here that. Oh, thank you. It's great to revisit the information on a regular basis. Yeah. And yeah, common traits with students with ADHD. Yeah, this is the thing, isn't it? Yes, there's lots of common themes through a lot of these. Okay. So I'm just going to touch briefly on this because, you know, we're all here because we know the research about music, and how important it is for students. We know the research about the impact of music education on the brain. And so in terms of research into autism, music education and autism, there isn't a lot there. There are some small studies, but there's been a lot more in the music therapy domain. And I feel like, you know, we can really take some things from this, because particularly in settings like mine, where it's really a specific special education setting, you know, I think the lines are blurred between education and therapy. Maybe music therapists would disagree with me there, but I do come from a bit of a space of understanding with that too. I took the opportunity several years ago to attend the European Music Therapy Conference in Vienna in 2016. And I found that really encouraging. I did get a range of responses as an educator. What are you doing here? You know, why would you come to this? There's a bit of animosity between education and therapy. But I also had some really, really positive experiences of people embracing it and saying, it's fantastic. I'm really glad that as an educator, you've chosen to come to this, and, you know, we can learn from each other. And I do really think that therapy and education in this context can really just learn from each other and assist each other. So in terms of the music therapy research, initial research was really done on communication, you know, so the speech and language benefits of engaging in music therapy. And I think that's pretty obvious why that would make such a difference. And then they moved on to studying the social and emotional benefits and behavioural benefits of having music therapy, and found some really good links between increases in social and emotional behaviour. And so more recently, they've moved on to thinking, well, you know, how can we actually use music therapy to help with motor skills? And there's been some really good findings there saying that, you know, it can make a difference, and also with some cognitive things like executive functioning and attention and things like that. So I don't think I need to convince anybody here of the importance of music in helping anyone with many of their life skills and functioning skills, and particularly children. And so what I thought I would do is just have a look at some of the implications of each of those domains that we had a look at before on that constellation, and just have a think about some of their implications for, wow, it's already 2 o'clock, for teaching. Okay, so in terms of strengths and interests, the great thing is that music can be a high interest activity for many students on the autism spectrum, and so you can be achieving higher levels of engagement than you would be from other school tasks. And again, please pop in if you think of anything else that I've missed here, because by no means are these lists exhaustive. And some of the challenges are that you'll get poor engagement where the content isn't of interest. So and so the challenge then is to construct lessons that will engage students in a meaningful way. You get classes where you've got varying levels of interest in the art form as well as the topic, and you know, how do we then support the students, that, you know, small percentage of students who may have exceptional music abilities, while we're trying to take into account the rest of the students in our class. And so some of the other things that we need to think about, or some of the things that we can see from communication, is that again, what a great tool for teaching communication. What better tool than something that is so fun and accessible, and something that's, you know, from birth, that students are experiencing from birth, than with music. And so some of the challenges again that we find are that, you know, you've got poor comprehension of language, of verbal language, difficulty understanding more complex directions and concepts. There might be lengthy processing times, as we said, and limited verbal language, and planning and motor skills can be an issue too. It's a challenge, I should say. So just have to keep moving the picture around every time I put my screen up. So in terms of social interactions, again, music provides such an excellent opportunity for teaching social interactions, for just you know, helping to engage students in those activities. What we've got to remember is that students may interact in unconventional ways. So you know, what we think is the right way of responding to something may not be the way that they typically do without being taught. They may have a hypervigilance. I find this a lot in classroom, and I think this is why some of my students have learnt better in the Zoom meetings, is because particularly in our school, we've got a cohort of students together, and they might not get on, and I often find that hypervigilance around the behaviour of other students might be preventing students from actually engaging. And so, yeah, making that really more accessible for them can be a real challenge. And some students have no interest in interacting with others, or they might prefer to just interact with adults. And so trying to get them to interact with other students can be a real difficulty. So in terms of leisure and play, the good thing about music is they can be very enjoyable. So it can be like a leisure activity, and it can be incorporated into leisure activities. So I think the challenge I find with that is sometimes if you want to go in with material that the students already know as a leisure activity, it can actually be really hard to then transfer it to a teaching activity. So I find in a lot of what I do, I actually like to come in with material that is actually unfamiliar and start from scratch. And also you'll find that often students will use instruments in unconventional ways, you know, as a plaything or for sensory stimulation. So, you know, if you have the boom whackers, you know, they like to blow through them and, you know, oh, I want the red one, not the yellow one. And, you know, so you do run into sorts of different issues like that in terms of materials and instruments. So for the sensory domain, my mouse, I can't move everyone's pictures. So music can be a very multi-sensory experience. And so again, where students are having difficulty with sensory regulation, we can actually use that to help practice regulation and explore good experiences. And so you'll find things like there might be sensitivity to loud sounds or songs, or certain types of sounds. And like I said before, we don't actually always know that what we're wanting students to focus on sensorily is actually what they're focusing on. And I find too that movement activities may heighten their senses, and so it makes it difficult to be going from group to movement activity, particularly locomotor movement activities, and then back again into a group. So that's, and they may obsess about certain things and want you to play them over and over again. Oh, can we play it again, you know, let's do that one again. So there's just some of the challenges that presents. So thinking, the good thing is students thrive on predictability and repetition, so we can really make use of that, and they can also view things from a very unique perspective. But the challenges with that is that they might have rigid thought patterns and really difficult then to engage in creative tasks. It might be difficult for them to generalize from one context to another, and they may be reluctant to move from one activity to the next. I remember one time I took a violin into a class of younger students, with a lot of them without verbal language, and one of the boys was really, 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 really sad to the point of throwing tantrums when I had to put it away, you know, because he just wanted to keep playing this violin. And I think the other thing that I find tricky with the thinking is there's an expectation of success the first time, and often I'll find that if they don't have that success, they'll give up. And then it can be really, really hard to re-engage and motivate them again. So we're in the experiencing and displaying emotions domain. You know, music provides an excellent medium for teaching and expressing feelings. In fact, my unit that I did on Zoom music for the last term with some of our students was on feelings. But so it's a great way of doing it, because there's lots of songs, there's lots of music out there that can help teach these things. You might find some of the challenges are that you get extreme reactions to certain things. Last year, I'm not sure if any of the schools did the music count us in song, but it was kind of a little tiny bit sad, not really, but it was not quite as upbeat as some of the songs have been. And there was one of the boys in the class, he'd just bawl every time we played that song, you know. But the really good thing was he was actually accessing his strategies that he'd been learning in other contexts. So he'd actually take himself to his desk, you know, squeeze his hands together and do breathing, you know. And it came to a point where after a few weeks, he wasn't crying anymore, and he was actually able to participate in that activity. And so, as we said, they can have difficulty defining their own emotions and the emotions of others, and understanding the differences between close emotions. You know, scared and anxious, they kind of feel the same in my body, you know, but they come from a different place in terms of external stimuli. So that can cause difficulty. Now, I've just added one more thing that's not on that constellation, because I think this is a really, really important one, and a really great one for us in teaching music to students with autism and special needs. So imitation, coordination, motor skills, I think, are really a domain where a lot of our students have difficulty. And so music and movement are great because they provide a really non-threatening way to develop these skills. So some of the challenges, there's some students out there who much prefer to watch you do it than to actually participate and do it themselves. You've got students who have difficulties with the motor and planning skills to actually perform some things, you know. So even some of our students that I work with, you know, to raise their hand above their head, is the planning to do that is tricky, and the understanding that I can actually copy you and do that myself can be quite a challenge. So, and, you know, so there are elements of music and movement that require high levels of coordination. So we just need to keep that, I think, in mind when we're planning. Maybe I better not stop for questions. I'm just looking at the time. Do put your questions into the chat and we'll address them at the end. So I've just said there are 7 principles that I've come up with. Look, this is just a little bit about our school. you know, music was done by class teachers prior to 2015, and I was one of those. And you've got every other subject to teach, and you know, you're always paying it lip service because there's so many demands on you. And when I was appointed the specialist music teacher, at first I started working with one theme across the whole school, and then I've gone into different themes for different stages, and then I've started tapping into what teachers were covering in their other subjects. And Google Classroom has just been fantastic for me, and Google Slides, because we operate, as I said, over multiple sites. And what I've been asked to do is develop lessons that the teachers can run when I'm not there, because I can't cover out 13 sites every week. I actually do 2 terms at each site in the year. And so, but music in the New South Wales syllabus is meant to be done every term. And so what we've come up with is a bit of a plan for that. And so this is just about my personal framework. And this is where I'm coming from in what I'm presenting to you. So my goal is to make it accessible, fun and engaging. Those are the overriding things when I am planning my lessons. And I think that the other thing that I really keep in mind is the opportunity for music to provide students on the autism spectrum with a chance to work on some of the skills that they find difficulty with. And my mouse is really going now. Just for those who are not from New South Wales, just to give you an idea, this is my ideation of the New South Wales syllabus, music syllabus. So we've got all our elements of music in the middle, the activities we use to teach that, and then the repertoire. And look, let's be honest, the biggest focus, particularly for primary students, is going to be on that vocal music repertoire. And so a lot of what I'll be saying here kind of really comes more from that perspective. So my first principle would be link repertoire to known topics. And I'm not going to read through the reasons why. You can do that. I'm assuming everyone here can read. But so in terms of how that's worked for me is I've had access to the school scope and sequence. We've been working on this programming project where everyone's programming, you know, because we're across multiple sites, just to be able to do a little bit more sharing rather than everyone doing their own thing. So use it as a starting point. Talk to the teachers and find out, you know, what their focuses are, and then select your repertoire to fit in with that theme. This has kind of been the way that I've found that has really worked. So how that's looked, so this is our scope and sequence for this year, for instance, and you'll see that there's times there where the music unit doesn't necessarily link to anything. But for instance, up here in this one, you'll see that this particular unit I've called Roar Like a Dinosaur links to their science and technology unit. Here we've got this one, absolutely everybody links to community and remembrance unit. So et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm actually going to use this Roar Like a Dinosaur one as a little bit of a, show you some of the things that I've done as I go through the next lot of principles. So principle 2, less is more, and I'm sure I'm sure that you know, well, it's tricky when you've got a curriculum to cover and demands like that, but I think at the end of the day it's okay not to cover everything, and it's okay not to cover everything all the time. So I like to decide what particular skills I'm going to focus on, and then select a small number of pieces of music that are going to help with that. So for instance, in this Roar Like a Dinosaur, we actually kept it, that wasn't the sum total of the music. So this was over a whole term. That wasn't the sum total of all the music, but these were the ones that we were going to be focusing on learning musical skills from. And so just the 4 songs, some of you may be familiar with those. And I've just put a bit of an outline of some of the focuses for each of those, you know, what elements they've got in them. So keeping it simple, kind of tied in with the other 2, but just, you know, remembering, particularly, I think keeping in mind that for a lot of our students, they may have difficulty with motor skills and things like that, and memory and all those kinds of things. So just really keeping it simple. Stick to simple songs with easy repetitive melodies. And keep your accompanying actions simple. Use the same actions with the same section of the song, and then that really helps you to teach structure as well. Rhythm patterns, keep them simple. So for instance, with this We Are the Dinosaurs song, in the chorus, we're going to march around the room to the beat. And in the verse, we're going to the first verse, because it says we stop and eat our food. We're going to stop and pretend to eat. In the second verse, we're going to stop and rest. The chorus comes in between. And then in the coda, we're going to roar like a dinosaur. So let's all practice roaring like a dinosaur, because that's what we get to do at the end of the song. Okay, and principle 4, make learning visual. Now, this is a really big one from an autism perspective. And I'm hoping that a lot of people know a little bit about visual timetables and making things visual, because it wasn't a thing, but I think it's become more of a thing in education these days, when you've got particularly kids with autism and other special needs in your class. Personally, I think it benefits everyone. So it gives a point of focus, and it makes it there. It means they don't have to remember what you just said. It reduces anxiety. All of these things point to greater participation. So some of the things you can put into practice are providing a visual schedule of your music lesson, so they know what's coming. Using picture representations to represent what you're going to be doing. Keep them consistent when you're doing that. Look, and having said that, I still have to say there is a place for listening only. I'm not saying make everything visual. And also, I also believe in taking the visual, gradually withdrawing the visual away, as depending on the students, and because we want to also encourage the memorizing there. So that would be my corollary to that, is it's not all the time, but especially when we're initially teaching something, trying to make it visual is really super helpful. So for instance, one of the songs we did in this Roar Like a Dinosaur song was Dinosaur Stomp. And so here's a visual representation of what we're going to do. You look at that, the students can look at that and see that this is what we've got to do. One of the difficulties with Google Slides is you have to put everything on the one page, because if you change pages, the music changes. Yeah, thanks, Susan. I'm just looking at your comment. Absolutely. For sure. For young students, any students, I think, so much of this is really appropriate. I'll come back to that one a little bit later on with one of my next principles, and now it's not letting me move. Okay, so now principle 5 would be provide a predictable structure. And the reasons for this is that by doing this, we're going to create a safe learning environment. And also you're going to set yourself up for being able to make modifications if you've got a predictable structure. So for instance, have a starting and finishing activity, sandwich the activity so they really clearly know the beginning of the lesson and the end of the lesson. My big thing would be to keep the higher interest activities and the most disruptive ones for the end of the lesson, or towards the end of the lesson, so that you've got something for them to look forward to, and also you just don't have to try and bring them back again for another 25 minutes after they've done some really heightening activity. And because where your pictures are, I can't see anything there. And because my mouse is playing, I put new batteries in this recently. And of course, like all good teachers, be prepared to read the room and, repeat an activity if it's going really well, or if you think that there needs to be some more consolidation on it. So here's for instance, I just mapped out what I did with the Roar Like a Dinosaur thing in terms of content. So you can see, so this was not, we actually did a listening. I chose a different dinosaur movie theme for each lesson, a new one, and we watched an orchestra playing it or listened to it, and then they got to talk about the tempo and their feelings about it, and then we actually watched the section of the film that the music came from. So that was consistent across the lesson. The lessons, even though the content changed each time. And then I always have a bit of just to play an instrument jam at the end, pick an instrument, or we're only going to do shaking instruments today, things like that. And I would choose a dinosaur themed music, often in the pop category, or something more jazz. So we're exposing students to different genres of music. And we will do that always at the end. And you can see, you know, we did the "We Are the Dinosaurs" consistently at the beginning of the lesson for quite a while before we slotted it in somewhere else. All right, so there's a real predictability about the structure of the lessons. So to explicitly teach every component, I think, is a really, really important thing. Don't assume that students are just going to pick it up. So they often need explicit step-by-step instruction for any new skill or activity. And this is really good too, because then it can allow you to pace, you know, appropriately to the cohort. You can assist students if they're not sure what to do and correct them. Again, I know I'm coming from a space where I've got a smaller group of students in the class. So I hope there's still some take-home things, yeah, with what I'm saying here. And so that way too, if you've taught them first, then when you actually include the music, they're successful from the start. So the way I would do that is like task analyze how you're going to teach each piece of music, each song. So think about it, break it down. Which bit am I going to teach first? Decide on which order you're going to teach them in the time frame. So it might be the chorus first, or you might teach the verse first. And I think the big thing with that is to revise from the last lesson what you did when you're about to teach some new content. So here's this is kind of my teaching sequence for this dinosaur stomp. So introducing it by saying, okay, in this song, we're going to use our body to play some percussion. So these are the two types of body percussion we're going to use. And I would ask, depending on the cohort, what do you think this first symbol is asking us to do? And what do you think the second symbol is asking us to do? So I'm introducing the expectation. We'll all practice doing the clap and we'll all practice stamping our feet. So now we know the expectations. Then I've got, this is the part A section that we do this twice, and just, you know, I've got the dash in there to mean that we're not going to do anything at this point. We're just steering away from putting in any musical notation things. So we can really clearly see, you know, and this really helps with reading because we're going from left to right, you know, top to bottom, and clearly see what's expected of us. So we're going to clap, stomp, stomp, stomp. I'm going to get you to do the next one with me. Okay, so what I would do then, we'll practice that in situ in the context of the song. That's for the verse. And then for the A section, for the B section, okay, let's do it together, shall we? 1, 2, 3, go. Stomp, stomp, stomp. And again. Okay, good. All righty. And then we would practice putting that into the context of the song. And then we would practice sections 1 and 2. And then we would practice section 3. So really, really breaking it down and teaching every component explicitly, practicing each component explicitly, so that when you get to the end, you play the song and we all know what to do. Wait. There's a bit of an introduction here. Are you ready? Go.
Dinosaurs have great big feet that stomp, stomp, stomp. Dinosaurs have great big teeth that chomp, chomp, chomp.
Section 2.
Stomp, 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 and a chomp, chomp, chomp.
Again.
Stomp, 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 and a chomp, chomp, chomp.
Section 1.
Stomp,
Oh, section 3.
Chomposaurus, stomp, chomp. I'm a saurus, stomp, stomp. You're a saurus, chomp, chomp. Dinosaur.
Okay, I'm going to move on from that. We're having way too much fun. It is lots of fun. I love my job. Repeat, 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 I think is my last principle here. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Okay, students will gain confidence. They'll get an experience of success. They'll end up with some songs that they know really well instead of a few songs that they might be able to hum a line from. And also, once you've got that confidence with the song, it's a little bit easier to incorporate experimentation with it. So yeah, including the same content over a period of weeks, developing it. So depending on your cohort, I probably would have done that teaching of those elements of that song I can't remember because it was term 1, but over a couple of weeks. You know, so we've learnt the movements and actions to the song over a couple of weeks. We're incorporating beat and rhythm and those musical contexts into it. And then we can move on to learning to doing some improvisation. So I'm going to do it with this song. So this is, if we all know the song, I'm Bringing Home a Baby Bumblebee. So that's the tune to this song. And it's just, I'm bringing home a baby dinosaur. Won't my mommy hide behind the door? I'm bringing home a baby dinosaur. Roar, roar, roar. Okay, so that's the song. So my first lesson, I would be introducing it and I would just teach the actions. And then I would sing it and just get them to do the actions. And you can see so many things that are going on here. We're teaching pitch, you know, we're teaching beat when we're doing the different actions. Second lesson, I would ask them to say, okay, remember that dinosaur song? I think I set this up, you know, what if you could go to the shop and buy yourself a baby dinosaur? You know, so like set it up. Next lesson, recall if they have any memory from the song, because we want these students to try and have those, you know, remember things. Sing it through with the actions. So the third lesson, I would then sing it through with the actions and then maybe ask someone if they want to sing it by themselves. By now they're confident with it, performing it in front of the other students. Then my next lesson, we would sing it through the actions and then we'd say, oh, what if mummy's not home? Who else might hide behind the door? And then we'll sing it through. I'm bringing home a baby dinosaur. Daddy, won't my daddy hide behind the door? Okay, so then we're incorporating improvisation in a really safe space. Then we might think about the next thing we might do is like, where else could you hide? You know, so really, really making it really safe to start thinking outside of the square of that thing, of that particular song. I'm really conscious that we are running out of time, which is good because that's actually my final thing. So how often do I have the lessons? I do them once a week with each stage and for a whole term. So I typically plan for it to be about 9 weeks, you know, give or take when there's a sports carnival on and they can't come or I'm sick or whatever. Yeah, so maybe I'll just stop the sharing. And if you have a pressing question, maybe quicker to unmute yourself and ask it. Otherwise, I'll just pop my email into the chat in case you wanted to, touch base with me and ask for any more questions, clarifications. But otherwise, yes, I got it all right.
Catherine, and for everybody else too, just for your info, yes, the email's there, but also it is on the conference website back on the original spot. So if you lose the one, it's in the other for the next 6 months.
Yeah, sure. Fantastic. Thank you so much for indulging me. It's been fantastic to share with you. And I hope one day we can meet in person.
Okay, has anybody got any other questions before we close up? We've got about 2 minutes. Oh, Susan.
No, 3 minutes left or whatever.
Susan, just take yourself off mute. Yep.
Yep.
Go for it, Susan. Oh, we've lost her. Susan, are you there?
It's gone shy.
Okay, well, all right.
Yeah.
Well, folks, anything further, I think, yes, send on an email through to Catherine. And Catherine, thank you so much. It's been really great.
Thank you. And thanks for the feedback, everybody. Well done. Well done for persevering with it. And enjoy the rest of the conference. I will now.
Okay, bye.
Bye.